Now to fall election news and a story about 3 counties in the state that have a distinctive voting record. You don't need a crystal ball to predict that the Dane County vote will be mostly Democratic or that the Waukesha County vote will go mostly Republican. In fact, most counties around the state have a tendency to support one party more than the other. But did you know there are 3 counties in Wisconsin that are much harder to pin down? Here and Now's Zach Schultz tells us which they are and tries to figure out why.
The voters in Richland, Lincoln, and in Forest County can be described in many ways.
I think it's a very independent-minded group.
I can read people pretty well.
They're looking for honest answers. They like people to be truthful with them.
My voters, I think, are pretty savvy to figuring out what's really accurate.
And I think they take voting serious.
I would like to think we're all very astute and good judges of character, but I don't know if we're any better than anybody else at it.
You wonder what people do when they walk into a ballot box.
We're the ones that...
Many words, but ultimately it boils down to this.
And they know how to pick a winner. Ask them to buy stocks.
These 3 counties have voted for the overall winner of every presidential, gubernatorial, and U.S. Senate race since 1990. That means they've voted for Barack Obama and Tammy Baldwin, Scott Walker and the recall, Scott Walker and Ron Johnson, Barack Obama, Jim Doyle and Herb Kohl, George Bush and Russ Feingold, Jim Doyle, George Bush and Herb Kohl, Tommy Thompson and Russ Feingold, Bill Clinton, Tommy Thompson and Herb Kohl, Bill Clinton and Russ Feingold, and Tommy Thompson again. That's a total of 13 Democrats and 8 Republicans. And 4 times the voters split their ticket with a Democratic U.S. Senator and a Republican governor or president. So how does that happen?
I wish I knew the answer to that question.
I don't know exactly how it happens.
I wouldn't have believed that was possible.
I'm not sure what that is. I wish I could sit and tell you that I came up with the theory that works for all 3 of those. But that is quite an anomaly in the fact that it would go on that long.
It's hard to say anything can be a coincidence over and over and over.
At first glance, the counties of Richland, Lincoln, and Forest don't have much in common. They're in different parts of the state, they have different population sizes, their economies vary from agriculture to forestry products, but all 3 are mostly rural.
All 3 places are historically have been difficult places to earn a living.
Republican Senator Dale Schultz has represented Richland County for all of this streak.
The people who survive there, who thrive there, are the kind of people who learn to cooperate and work with each other.
Politicians working across party lines at the local level is a common theme.
I don't see hardly any party politics get into local offices.
Mike Monty publishes a local newspaper in Forest County and says the community knows how to rally around each other.
All it takes is have a house burned down, and politics go right out the window.
You know, we all live here, we all work here, we all have to exist here.
Paul Prue is the former Republican sheriff in Lincoln County.
We can disagree on our politics, but we need to be friends, we need to be civil to each other, and continue on with life. Life doesn't revolve around politics in itself.
Some of the times the issues that are big downstate really aren't, they're not real big issues up here.
Tom Thielke works with the Forest County Democratic Party, but has also been a school superintendent and on the county board. He says divisive topics like school choice aren't that relevant in the North Woods.
In our area, how many parents and kids are utilizing vouchers? Not very many. We don't have any private schools. You're going to get a voucher to go where?
Richland County's changed so much in that time period.
Thanks for being a part of today's program.
Ron Fruit owns the local radio station in Richland County and has been on the air for decades.
Used to be everybody had a tie to the farm. That's not the case anymore. And so I really think it's interesting that that has stayed the same, even though the diversity of people has changed dramatically.
I don't know if it's just one answer.
Will Burrows is involved in the Richland County Democratic Party and a former candidate for office, so he's knocked on a lot of doors.
One of the things I'd hear people say to me was that, well, I'm not affiliated with any party.
Our voters will flip. They are they go back and forth and back and forth.
Melissa Schroeder is chairwoman of the Lincoln County Democratic Party.
It's frustrating because you wake up at night thinking, what do I have to do to crack that bubble?
I'm always amazed at the end result of some elections.
Gene Bevel is involved in the Lincoln County Democratic Party and is a former teacher.
I talk to people all the time who don't really know exactly why they are going to vote the way they vote. They kind of decide as they walk into a poll.
Whether there is a logical explanation or not, the streak exists. So what does that mean for the election this fall?
Our numbers are so small, it's not like we're going to swing the state or anything, but I think we certainly are a good barometer.
Both sides are convinced if Scott Walker or Mary Burke wins these counties, they will win the state.
They'll win all three.
I fully expect that we'll win those counties and we'll win in November.
And judging by recent history, they're probably right. But at least one person doesn't want that to be the last time elected officials in Madison focus on Richland, Lincoln, and Forest County.
I think they should pay attention to us, to all three of these counties, because there's something we're doing that is right. And they should be looking at us and following our lead.
That was Zach Schultz reporting. Tell a politician where you live in Wisconsin and they will likely be able to predict how you vote, or at least how the majority of your neighbors vote. Wisconsin may be a purple state, but when it comes to geography, we are divided into Republican and Democratic areas on the map. And nowhere is that more apparent than in the Wisconsin Assembly. Here and now, Zach Schultz has the story.
Driving down Interstate 94, there are no signs that say when you're leaving Republican territory and entering a Democratic stronghold, unless you can translate geography into politics. Then it becomes quite obvious. The divide in the state assembly is not just between Democrats and Republicans. It is between Wisconsin's largest cities and the suburban and rural areas around them. Wisconsin's 10 largest cities contain 1.45 million people, 25% of the state's population. 9 of those 10 cities have elected Democrats to the assembly. Waukesha is the only exception. That adds up to 22 Democrats and 3 Republicans representing the big cities. The next 10 largest cities have 400,000 people, just 7% of the population. Republicans represent 7 of those 10 cities, but that's only 7 Republicans and 3 Democrats in the legislature. That urban-suburban split may determine how you view a piece of legislation.
We want to focus on solutions that deal with finding long-term answers, hopefully that empower the individual and don't rely so much on government.
Assembly Speaker Robin Voss is from rural Racine County.
I think liberals in many ways want government to be the change agent that has an impact on individuals. So it's that similar divide with where people live and how they vote, but it also factors into how we make legislation.
You have people that really don't understand urban versus suburban issues.
Democrat Peter Barca represents Kenosha, the 4th largest city.
The Republicans have passed bill after bill after bill that the leaders of the Milwaukee community have said are going to be devastating for that community. And it's fallen on deaf ears.
And we're talking about a wide range of issues, ranging from voting access to financing of schools, choice schools in particular, to the residency requirements, to local streets and roads.
Milwaukee Mayor Tom Barrett says conservatives in the suburbs are hostile towards the city.
I think that there are some legislators who, quite honestly, think that they're morally superior to the people who live in the city.
So there's pretty high sensitivity, I would say, by suburban legislators that are Republicans to issues that are happening in the cities.
Brian Schimming is with the Republican Party of Wisconsin. He says the GOP isn't anti-Milwaukee. They just have a different approach to tackling big issues like crime, education, and unemployment.
Republicans want to get at those issues as much as Democrats do. We just don't always necessarily believe it's money that solves them.
The urban-suburban split is part of a national trend. According to the blogger Dave Troy, population density is the key factor. Using the 2012 presidential election, he found the counties with the most density voted for President Obama, and the counties with the least density voted for Mitt Romney. He found the crossover point was 800 people per square mile. Above 800, there was a 66% chance you voted for Obama. Below 800, there was a 66% chance you voted for Romney. This 2010 census map shows the densest areas in Wisconsin in dark blue. When we add the 20 largest cities and their assembly districts, it becomes obvious the same density metric applies to Wisconsin. So how did this urban-suburban split occur? Kathy Kramer is a UW political science professor.
People are selecting into certain types of places, not on the basis of politics, but on the basis of things that currently correlate with political positions.
Conservatives want to live in a broader, more open space. Liberals want to live in a space that's more confined, that's considered walkable.
Even if it's self-selection, the politicians are working it to their advantage.
Our political leaders are pretty savvy about tapping into sentiments that are going to serve their own political party.
The current Republican majority in both the Senate and the Assembly and in the governor's office has intensified some of the split between urban and rural.
Kurt Witinsky is a lobbyist for the League of Municipalities, which represents the nearly 600 cities and villages in Wisconsin. He says in the past, most legislators had held office at the local level before coming to Madison. But the recent influx of Tea Party Republicans has required more education on what cities do and need.
It's more difficult to obviously discuss with a representative from that district typical urban issues like mass transit.
Funding mass transit is a great example of the divide between the big cities Democrats represent and the smaller cities and rural areas represented by Republicans.
I do fear that transit has become a partisan issue.
Greg Soibert is the transit director for Metro Ride, located in Wausau, the 17th largest city, represented by a Democrat. We spoke to him when Governor Scott Walker's budget pulled transit funding out of the transportation budget, making it more vulnerable to cuts in the future.
I wish we would look at the funding of public transit as part of the overall infrastructure in Wisconsin.
I view transit in many ways as another social program.
Speaker Voss says transit helps get people to jobs, but it's a small group of people.
They're a very defined group who get a very big subsidy to operate a transit system. So I view it very much like Medicaid.
There's a few people who control the agenda in the Assembly that don't like the idea.
Tim Hanna is the mayor of Appleton, the 6th largest city, represented by a Democrat.
Valley Transit truly is a regional public transportation system.
He says the battle over transit funding is part of a larger philosophical battle over the role of cities in general.
If we really want to grow this state's economy, we have to empower the cities. They're the engines, like it or not.
Hanna says Republican levy limits encourage growth in farm fields near the suburbs instead of redevelopment in the city.
But redevelopment often starts with, you got to tear something down before you can build something up. So I got to climb out of a hole in terms of building new value before I get any credit under the levy limits.
Voss says Republicans did the cities a favor by cutting their labor costs.
And that's why we gave them the tools like under Act 10 to be able to help save money to be able to spend on other services.
Hanna says it's not the way to grow jobs.
Don't start adopting policies based on partisan politics that are counter to what you say you want to accomplish.
Some Republicans have a sliver of a big city in their district, but it's not where they're from or where their voters are from. Only 10 of the 60 Republicans in the Assembly represent the 20 largest cities, and none of the 8 Republican leaders are from those cities. Compare that to the Democrats, where 25 of 39, or 64%, represent those cities, and 4 of the 6 leaders come from the big cities.
I don't see it as a us versus them. I really don't.
Brian Schimming says Republicans understand the issues in the cities. In fact, many of them used to live there.
All the legislators I talk to around Milwaukee, the ones that are Republicans, are folks who have worked there, grew up there.
Or they've gone to Summerfest there, or they've gone to the Brewers game there. No, we love Milwaukee. We just vote against it, that's all. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it.
Democrats bristle at the idea Republicans living in the suburbs know how to fix the cities.
They think that they know because they've been here, they've visited here, they may have worked here once. They don't live here now, they don't work here now, they don't see the challenges that we have.
So when people say, I don't want you writing legislation that is going to deal with my community, well then perhaps you should say we don't want any of the money that my constituents pay as well, because they pay a disproportionate share to urban areas and get very little back themselves.
The rural, urban, and suburban differences are significant enough that our lives really are different.
Professor Kramer says all groups are resentful of someone else writing laws for them.
I can write legislation that will address those concerns for you because clearly you can't do so yourself. I think in many respects that is a sentiment that's fueling polarization, this sense that I don't need to listen to you because I know the right answer already.
That was Zach Schultz reporting. Central to Governor Scott Walker's re-election bid are his $2 billion in tax cuts. But what does his challenger, Democrat Mary Burke, say about the cuts? Where do they come from, and will they help create jobs? We try to answer some of these questions by reaching out to experts and non-experts alike.
I think tax cuts are good. We all love tax cuts.
Everybody loves a tax cut. I love cutting taxes.
There's a lot of love for tax cuts, but that affection comes with caveats.
We've reduced your tax burden by more than $2 billion.
Just where did those cuts come? Since Governor Scott Walker took office and through the current budget, there have been about $750 million in income tax cuts. For the average 2014 filer, that will amount to about a $200 reduction. In the same period, there's been $535 million in property tax relief. That amounts to about a $130 reduction for the average homeowner. The remaining $700 million is accounted for in scores of individual and business credits and deductions and exemptions. Scott Walker both wants to give individuals money back in their pockets and induce job growth with tax cuts.
You see, we understand that as hardworking taxpayers, as consumers and employers, you're going to put that money right back to work.
But according to the Labor Department's quarterly census, Wisconsin's job growth lags neighboring states and isn't keeping pace with projections Walker made coming into office. So what gives? Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance President Todd Berry.
Fundamentally, it follows the national cycle. We may vary slightly from that. But because that is true, you cannot have a governor and legislators wave a magic wand and impact a $250 billion plus economy.
Experts agree state economic growth is not a quick recipe.
There's no single, secret sauce or magic thing that you do, and then all of a sudden your budget is fixed, your state starts to grow.
Still, economist Steve Malpezzi is on board to a point, and with those caveats.
I want taxes to be cut. If we can do that without having that basically just drive into similar cuts in essential services. You want growth. State governments that spend more of their money on some of the core functions of government, education and infrastructure as two of the essential elements.
Then there's the matter of whether the state could afford them.
It's just a question of, did the legislature go maybe a little too far too fast? Because revenue goes up and down, and right now it looks like we might be headed back into the red again.
In fact, the State Department of Revenue reported at the end of the fiscal year that income tax collections are short of expectations. The state's next budget has a projected shortfall of $642 million. Governor Walker counts on tax cuts to stimulate the economy. The response from his Democratic challenger, Mary Burke.
But I disagree with the way Scott Walker has done this. He's been fiscally irresponsible. He's spending money that we don't have now. The latest estimates show that our state revenues aren't keeping up with the budget forecasted.
Putting money back in the hands of the hardworking taxpayers, I think, is totally the responsible thing to do. I think it's irresponsible when you have a surplus after you pay those bills off to keep it in the hands of government when there are people all across the state who desperately need it.
My own preference would be to build in more of a fiscal cushion, because you have these ups and downs and these inabilities to forecast accurately.
Complicated tax and budget policies aren't lost on people we stopped to talk with at the Sauk County Fair this summer.
Once the money is in the coffers or whatever, it should just stay there. I don't think you need to send it back out to the people again.
Everybody loves more money in their pocket, but on the same stance, you got to pay your bills. And when we're having a shortfall in the transportation budget for repairing highways and those projects are falling short, tax cuts may not be the best option at the time.
It helps some, but not everybody.
What would you like to see?
Helping the middle class more than anything.
Because you don't think it does?
Not enough.
50% of the benefits of all the tax cuts during the Walker administration go to the top 1/5 of taxpayers. So they're not going to make a huge difference, but cumulatively, the effect on the state budget is very dramatic.
I have watched us go through 3, 4, 5 economic cycles. We've never learned the lesson. We always end up either tax cutting or spending our way into trouble.
Barry says the jury is out on whether tax collections will pick up over the summer and into the fall, plumping the fiscal cushion. Meanwhile, the race for governor will be going full steam.
And taxes are going down.
It's human nature, it's not like a moral failing of politicians. It's human nature to say, I want to have some activities that really focus on this and that we're going to see an immediate payoff.
We've broken down which party gained and lost the most votes, and that alone can predict who won the election. For example, in 2008, Milwaukee County cast 475,000 votes. In 2010, that dropped off by 134,000. 82% of the drop-off came from Democrats. In Waukesha County, the vote total dropped by 44,000, but Republicans were only 24% of the drop-off. The other 76% of the drop-off was from Democrats. It shouldn't be a surprise Scott Walker won. But in 2012, Milwaukee County cast an additional 151,000 votes, with a 58% increase among Democrats. In Waukesha County, turnout was also up, but only 21% higher among Republicans. President Obama won with 53% of the vote.
There's a reason why we won. We won because we showed up and we voted.
Michelle Obama's words at a Mary Burke rally were simple but true.
Because when we stay home, they win.
The same is true for Republicans. Democratic Governor Jim Doyle won in 2002 and 2006 when Republican turnout was down.
What I would do, based on my experience at Trek Bicycle, but also as an entrepreneur myself, I'd first and foremost use a new concept that's used in Cleveland called anchor institutions. You use anchor institutions like healthcare, hospitals, educational institutions that actually work with communities surrounding it to start new businesses, help them to grow those businesses, give them contracts. We also need to invest right in the local communities, in neighborhoods where we have boarded up storefronts.
We need capital investments here in the city of Milwaukee. We've made that by putting in the heart of the city, our new Department of Children and Families headquarters. We've done it through an investment we made to help the Global Water Center. We made that most recently in the money that we invested into an Energy Innovation Center on the near north side of Milwaukee, which is in the heart of some of the highest levels of unemployment. We're going to continue to build off of that and not just talk about it, put our money where our mouth is.
What's interesting to me about that is that it almost sounded as though he was taking a page out of her jobs plan, talking about growing Milwaukee from its center, kind of, and yet he was very specific. She kind of attacked him on that. What do you think?
Well, it's almost like they've depoliticized job creation. Everybody is for job creation. Everybody wants to do all the good ideas. Everybody wants to make investments. You know, when Bill Clinton used to talk about we need to invest in infrastructure, Republicans used to make fun of him. They said, oh, you're trying to justify a tax increase. I think it's really significant that Scott Walker uses the investment verbiage and strategy, and good for him. In other words, ideology is not separating them. Rather, it's the perspective of how to accomplish it. I think it was good they were talking about.
Loudenbeck's home was now in the newly drawn 31st Assembly District, which stretched east into the more conservative Walworth County.
I had about 50% new people. I had a new number, new senator.
She lost most of the city of Beloit, with her new district line running along Prairie Avenue on the far east side.
When the Republicans gerrymandered the state, they really took care of Representative Loudenbeck.
Before redistricting, Democrat Tim Cullen's 15th Senate District used to include Representative Loudenbeck and most of Rock County. Now it does not. Senator Cullen says redistricting was a lifesaver for Loudenbeck.
They got her out of Beloit, Democratic Beloit, and moved her over into part of Rock County, Republican part of Rock County, and into southern Walworth County.
Representative Loudenbeck laughs at the idea the Republican Party went out of their way to save a freshman lawmaker.
I think it's very flattering to think that people thought it was that important.
But the facts are clear. Amy Loudenbeck's re-election prospects went way up with the change. Documents revealed in a redistricting lawsuit show Republicans knew the voter makeup of their new districts, and Loudenbeck went from a district where Republicans averaged 45% of the vote to a district where they averaged 57% of the vote. In 2012, Loudenbeck won re-election with 56% of the vote, almost exactly what was predicted.
Would you defend how the Government Accountability Board, the state's election agency, has interpreted the state's campaign finance laws when it comes to limiting collaboration between candidates and groups that say they are independent?
Now, the current Attorney General had a conflict in this case, and so he cannot represent the Government Accountability Board because he also represents one of the judges involved in John Doe 2. He also said that the Government Accountability Board has taken a tenuous legal position relative to the statutes. Now, the GAB does have counsel. Special counsel has been appointed to represent them. They will not go unrepresented. However, laws in Wisconsin and anywhere are entitled to a presumption of constitutionality. The regulations created by a regulatory agency like the Government Accountability Board are not entitled to that same presumption. So when a regulatory agency goes outside the parameters of the law or outside the parameters of rules set by the courts in a decision, then you can't defend it. You have to advise them that you've gone beyond the standards, you've gone beyond the rules, and your position is not defensible.
And so your answer is no, you would not defend the GAB?
Not all of their decisions, no.
Susan Happ, same question. Would you defend how the Government Accountability Board has interpreted the state's campaign finance laws when it comes to limiting collaboration between candidates and groups that say they are independent?
I would, and that's because I don't see any constitutional infirmity in the law as it exists. You know, this law, simply put, is meant to prevent collaboration between these groups and to have openness and to make sure that we know that these outside groups aren't directly coordinating with the campaigns of the candidates who they are supporting.
Take all of them to cast their ballot and cast their ballot for Mary Burke.
The fact is, President Obama is not in high demand right now across the country due to his slouching approval ratings in the polls. Many Democratic candidates, especially those running for the U.S. Senate, don't want him in their state right now. And Mary Burke did not appear publicly with the president in his 2 previous visits to Wisconsin earlier this year.
So I am thrilled that he is in Wisconsin to help us out.
Governor Walker sees this visit as a sign of weakness.
I'm glad he's here. I think it's a reflection of the fact that they can't get over the 47% that aren't right now, and so they decided to concede, to me, any of the last-minute debate with undecided swing voters in key areas across the state and instead focus on trying to gin up the vote in Madison and Milwaukee.
I think that's desperate talk from a desperate politician who knows that he's on the verge of losing an election.
Mike Tate is chairman of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. He says Burke is campaigning in the same parts of the state as Walker.
You know, Mary's campaigning in Milwaukee, but she's also campaigning all over the state. The next 7 days, you're going to see her in every nook and cranny of Wisconsin.
We've charted the candidates' official appearances since Monday. And while Governor Walker has made more stops than Mary Burke, they are similar in that both are making sure to hit each media market to maximize their appearances on TV. And the truth is, neither one needs to worry about getting enough media attention. National media outlets followed both campaigns, using the president's visit to talk about a close election. In any event, you won't hear Democrats apologize for using the president to boost turnout.
We're happy the president's here today. I think it's going to have a great impact on the race.
They can bring in all the surrogates in the world, but I think in many ways that backfires, particularly with the president.